Hi, I'm Gary Allen Ruth. I've been a professional writer of science fiction, fantasy, and mystery stories for many years. But there's one story in particular, Perseverance Triumphant, that came about in a really unusual way. I literally woke up one morning determined to make myself a steampunk costume. The night before, I'd seen a TV show that had a couple of scenes in it that were inside a fictional New York club that was devoted to steampunk, and lots of people, lots of costumes, props and things. And I woke up the next morning thinking, this is really neat, I got to make myself a costume. I've been a fan of steampunk for many years because I've been reading Jules Verne's stories, especially had seen the Disney version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and the original TV series Wild Wild West, which was totally steampunk. And that all shaped my desire to make a good costume. Now when I got to thinking about it, I realized I couldn't just make a costume without having a persona first. I had to know who I was going to be. So I decided what I'd like to be is the captain of a steam-powered spaceship, a starship. Something like Star Trek except set in Victorian times. So I started working on that idea and I decided I wanted to be Captain Demetrius Cogswell. Cogswell, obviously, because cog, steampunk, you know. But to do that then, I had to think about some other things. So once I had that character in mind, and I kind of visualized him looking a little bit like Sean Connery in The Hunt for Red October with the beard and everything. So that all shaped the look that I was going for. It's sort of a Navy outfit, but not exactly, something a little bit different. So that's what I decided to come up with. And then I started assembling bits and pieces of things, all kinds of different costume elements that I was going to use. And took a number of things, a special coat, brass buttons, lots of other trim, a special cap, some insignia, and things like that. And it took a while. By the time I got through breakfast, I'd not only come up with a persona and a character, I'd also imagined all kinds of other things, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But the character was what began the whole process, and Captain Demetrius Cogswell was the basis for it all. Captain Demetrius Cogswell, at your service. This is the costume that I came up with. In the process of working out the character, the persona and everything, I also was thinking about how would the spaceship work, how would it be built. I imagined it might be very much like a submarine, except in space you're keeping out the void of space, whereas in a submarine you're keeping out the water. So I sort of kept that in mind as I worked, and decided it would have to be built in space using a special electromagnetic lift device invented by Tesla to lift all the pieces of bulkheads and other parts up into space. Once I had the idea for the ship in mind, I figured, well, it has to have a crew. So I thought, well, besides the captain, he'd need some way of communicating with the Star Admiralty, especially at great distances. Now, radio waves were possible then, but they're kind of slow. So I thought, what would be quicker, almost instantaneous? And I thought, the power of the mind. So I decided that the ship's communication officer would be a telepath. So I came up with the idea of the Esper agents, which are a special team of ladies who have telepathic abilities normally, and that ability is enhanced by wearing a special device on their head, their forehead, that has an entangled crystal, so that they're all in communication with each other and with the Star Admiralty. That allowed for almost instantaneous communications. Then I decided on some of the other crew members. The second in command, a science officer who's a professor wearing a white lab coat and special glasses with swing-up lenses and things, and Professor Ambergath. And then I decided there would be able seamen, which would not be regular humans, but robots. And I devised a sort of an unusual way for the robots to be able to think and function, based on a kind of a silly pun, but it worked and made more sense as it went along and allowed for some really exciting scenes. After I got that part done, I decided it'd have to be a villain, an appropriate villain, and came up with a really nasty guy who's a baron in the Austro-Hungarian Empire with a castle way up at the top of a mountain peak, which would only be accessible by Zeppelin. As I developed this more and more, I came to realize that I didn't just come up with an idea for a costume. I actually came up with an idea for a screenplay, and I started putting more work into that, and I eventually wrote a 2-hour screenplay based on that whole concept. And a little bit later on, I expanded the concept and turned the screenplay into an actual book. And the book has been available on Amazon and other locations for a while now. But it was really something that, out of a simple desire to come up with a costume, I came up with a lot more than that, and really had an awful lot of fun doing it. I love steampunk, and creating these characters in this situation was just a joy to work on. So, thank you for listening.